And I'll start with Kevin.
Good morning, Kevin Klopp, Director of Development Services with the City of Hallandale Beach.
Good morning, I'm Daniel Roseman, City Manager in the City of Hallandale Beach. Welcome.
Good morning, Jerry Gracia, City Commissioner, City of North Lauderdale.
Good morning, being for Broward County Commission.
Good morning, Dick Blattner, Commissioner for the City of Hollywood and Chairman of the Broward County Metropolitan Planning Organization.
James Cromer, representing Broward MPO.
Welcome, representing Broward MPO.
I'm going to turn it over to our County Commissioner for our district, Commissioner Bean Fur, for some opening remarks.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. First of all, I want to thank Hallandale for doing this. I think this is a great start. I think all of us are wanting to hear this conversation, not only from the city perspective, but from the county perspective. All of us really want to find out that we can get a green light no matter where we are at all times. So hopefully we figure that out. But transportation means a lot. It means different things to different people. It means if you're somebody who can't get to a bus, when you shut in, it means something to them. If you're somebody who can get who rides a bus that's hard, that first mile and last mile, it means something to them. If you ride a bike, it means, or walk, it means that's a different thing to you. If you're stuck in traffic, that it means something else. If you're on the other side, or if you're trying to catch a rail, it's all of us have a different experience, different perspectives. And when we start to talk about transportation, I think we have to think of all of those things. I think it has to be very comprehensive. And I think because we're looking at this on a countywide scale and are considering, I know the MPO put forth an idea the other day, which was, I'm sure we're going to be talking about that. And I know that the county has been doing with Speak Up Broward, the MPO, has talked with, I think, 45,000 people to get their perspective. We have a lot to kind of work with. And as we move forward over the next couple of months, whether or not to put something on the ballot to go further and ask our residents where would they like to go with this, we're going to need a lot of discussions on this. We're lucky that today we have many of the experts in the area, not only from our own county commission and their staff, but from the MPO, as well as many elected officials, as well as many departments. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. I think we all are. And thank you for putting it together.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And with that said, I wanted to start off, and this is to be a dialogue, but to set the stage and understand that this issue, let's talk transportation, has been had for years and years and years. It is not anything new. It's come about in modern society. And I wanted to talk about the history of transportation and how the dilemma has been in a century even before us. And just to couch it, in 1865, the first signal was actually established in front of Parliament because they were having issues getting to and from the Parliament in London. And this was a manual sign. It was one signal, stop or go. And so we saw the advent even before carts and, horses and pedestrians and people trying to get around modern civilization, that traffic was an issue. The first, and actually, this is a picture from 1910 when actually the first traffic system was actually patented. As you can see, it's up there in kind of the right top quadrant. And
gentlemen, welcome on board. Please stow your carry-on luggage onto the seat in front of you or in the overhead bin and take your seats as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Toyota is currently developing a system which integrates personal vehicles and public transport in order to provide a city and its inhabitants with the most comfortable transportation experience possible: HARMO. There are two main features to this system: a multimodal navigation system with the capability to incorporate many forms of transport into one route, and a mobility network of ultra-compact electric vehicles for travelling short distances within the city when needed. HARMO will inform you of traffic congestion before you leave, and through its smartphone application will recommend a better route to avoid traffic jams. On top of this, you will be sent a periodic traffic forecast in order to plan your routes beforehand and undertake your daily commute stress-free. Not only will HARMO find the most convenient route for you, but will also inform bus operators of a potential increase in passengers so they can increase capacity when necessary and maintain a smooth operation throughout the day. HARMO recommends routes based on a multimodal network of transport systems, including a HARMO Ride, car-sharing network of ultra-compact electric vehicles suitable for moving freely within the city. This new type of service is designed to take you short distances from the station to your desired destination or moving around among parking stations. Its small size also means less parking space is needed. Reservations can be made with ease from HARMO's application, making picking up your HARMO ride at the station smooth and seamless. You can then leave the vehicle at any of the many parking stations, allowing you to take advantage of this free-flowing network anytime, anywhere. The more people that use this convenient HARMO system, the more the HARMO Centre can gather and analyse a view of the city in its entirety, and use this information to suggest a more efficient use of private and public transport. With everyone using various means of transportation according to the traffic situation, traffic congestion can be reduced. By doing a small part, you will be increasing the comfort of your city as a whole. Getting about town can be a joy. Help to steer your city in a better direction. The fulfillment of this vision is now underway.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over now to Commissioner Beanie because I asked him to address us on that interconnection and the strides that they've been making in the county with our signalization and our bus systems. Commissioner?
And I'm actually going to pass this right over to Chris.
You can come up with Chris.
Yeah, our staff has been putting together a plan along the same as the MPO has, and I think you have a couple of people here from staff that can address a couple of things. I know one of the things that a lot of people would like to hear is what's going on with signalization. Because I know one of the things to speak of Broward was one of the highest things on the list that people were interested in. And one of the things I'm kind of interested in is where are we now? How far have we gone to working on signalization throughout the county? But secondly, if there was more funding, is there another level of signalization that we can get to that is even more that they can almost learn along the way? So can you take us from there?
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk about public transportation, but I'm also going to pass this along to our Director of Traffic Engineering, who is much more the expert in traffic and signalization than we are on the bus side. So I'll let Scott Brewer come take this. Switch places.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Brewer. I'm the Director of Broward County Traffic Engineering Division. And signalization is definitely the topic that everybody loves to hate. So We, in the past 5 years, I guess about 5 years ago, I was actually recruited to lead the group that revamped our signalization and synchronization process. We had two or three things working in parallel. The first thing was we had a very old system, it was about 25 years old. It was based, it was an analog communication-based system running on old Federal Highway UTCS software, which was actually state-of-the-art at its time, but it kind of got old with time. And we migrated off that system to brand new software platform for signalization. We also upgraded totally our network to a fully digital network. We're using fiber optics, cellular, and Ethernet over copper. So for the last 5 years, we retimed the entire county twice. And we also migrated from an old system to a new system, totally new software. Every intersection, every piece of software, every controller, and the main software has been updated. Our system is really about 2 months old now. It's using the latest version of the software, and it's fully implementable, transit system priority, and lots of other technologies. Where we are is, during that process, we did a lot of data collection. We clearly demonstrated that we had between 15 and 40% travel time improvements on our roadways. The problem, though, is that traffic signals are really just valves. They're valves in a network, and fully optimized signal is only about 42%, 43% efficient. So we keep throwing this and it works. We can just add more and more friction. So even with all the work we've done, we can probably only eke out about 5, 10, maybe 15% more performance just using signalization. So the next 10 years or so, whatever gains we can get in the signal system are going to be eaten up by traffic growth, that's just the way it is. And traffic congestion and delays on the system, it's not a linear function. If you're at capacity and you had 20% more trips, you're going to get 45% more delay, more congestion. So at status quo, if we're talking transit system that's integrated, intermixed with our vehicles out there, we're going to need 40% more buses just to keep the same headways that we are today in a 40% more congested situation. So even though we're going to continue to work as best as possible on the signal system, there are some new technologies we're going to be implementing. We have a project with the Florida Department of Transportation starting in a year or so on Pines Boulevard and I-75, that corridor out there. It's going to be an adaptive system which just kind of throws away everything we know about regular traffic signals, and basically just this kind of a free form tries to optimize green time just based on vehicles arriving through that are detected by array detection devices. So we're going to keep implementing new technologies. And one of the things that's going to happen is that the signal system and the transit system needs to be fully integrated in terms of systems that, transit signal priority and other kind of adaptive technologies where the signal system knows where the buses are so that we can kind of work together and also provide kind of a little bit of priority for the transit system as they try to maneuver through the congestion. I don't really think that the solution in the long term is through traffic signalization. I feel that a lot. But the reality is, it's kind of simple mathematics. If we're going to be putting, we have no more new roadways. We can't really widen roadways. We can't add lanes, but we're going to need to somehow put 30, 40, 50% more humans in the same amount of time on those roads. So we're going to have to look at ways to enhance our ability to get more people per vehicle out there. And that's really where mass transit comes in. And unfortunately, we really need to start planning now, because 10, 15 years from now, we're not going to have any way to add buses or trains on exclusive facilities. We don't have any exclusive facilities planned. All our transit system is going to be in the same vehicle network that our cars are, with the exception of dry rail and possibly all over Florida. So we need to start thinking that it was great to see the innovation in transportation, because that's what we got to do. We can't just build on what we know. We got to start thinking about what can we do totally different to get more people on these right-of-ways. And I just think that's where we need to go. So we're gonna continue. Our staff works really hard. We're going to be adding more technologies. Where we started a group that's basically just a group that works with all of the transit professionals, works with DOT's ITS group. See Melissa Acker is here from DOT. She oversees the TSMO group, which is the Transportation System Management Operations, kind of the arterial version of what they do on I-95 and I-75 in terms of intelligent systems. So we're working together to kind of bring all those platforms together towards the future and technological point of view. And how to get more humans in the same right of way, that's the tough one. So I guess I can hand it over to Chris.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's not exactly what everybody wanted to hear, I don't think. Because I think everybody needs to know what the reality is on some stuff. And I think you're right with regard to the innovation part of it. That is something we're going to, when we look at what is happening with Uber, Lyft, and what they're doing throughout the country with Uber Pool and Lyft Pool, they're actually finding ways to share rides and get them to the buses. And then when they get off the bus, get there. There's a little bit, but then you're also watching companies like GM and Google and all of them starting to work on this on the driverless cars. Those things we're going to have to be thinking about. How does that play into this? Because we can't just be thinking of this one or our present day style. And one thing I don't know if you can talk about that has to do with the buses now. You know, like on a phone, if you're on Uber and you can see the bus coming, you can see the car coming, etc. Are we going to be able to be seeing that with the buses, etc.? I know we're going to be able to see real-time numbers coming.
I'll let Chris.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yes, there are a number of initiatives that we have underway right now at Broward County Transit. One is what we call our real-time information system. With your smartphone or any computer device, you will be able to find any bus in the system at any time. So that technology is actually in development as we speak. It's been implemented in a number of transit projects across the world and now becoming more predominant in the United States. And we are at this point are testing those apps and computer software now. In addition to that, a project that we are about to kick off is somewhat related to that in terms of moving buses faster through the network as it becomes more congested. One of the technologies that, again, we're starting to see implemented across the world, across the country, is the use of mobile ticketing, which is where you could actually buy your ticket on your smartphone, and when you get to either the bus or the train, you just hold it up to a reader. Studies have shown that moves the transit system and actually speeds the boarding time for passengers on the transit system 38%. So in terms of the opportunity to take advantage of time savings, because the buses, quite frankly, for the most part, don't operate in an exclusive right of way. So we're moving at the speed of the traffic. As Scott mentioned, as the county grows, as traffic becomes more congested, we're going to need more buses to accommodate that growth, keeping in mind that they can only move as fast as the traffic. Now, we have tested, and in a couple places around the county, we have done, he mentioned the traffic prioritization, where we have seen some improvements in bus traffic time, where the traffic signal software you mentioned before has the traffic signal controller communicating with the bus. And if the bus is behind schedule and it's within a certain distance of the traffic light, it'll hold that green till the bus passes through. And we do that until the bus is back in schedule and it reverts back to its normal cycle. So there are some technologies that we actually have in place now, and there are a number more that we're looking at, trying to, again, to address the continuing growth of Broward County and the continuing increase of traffic congestion.
Yeah, I did think, and I wanted to make sure that you touched on some of the budget issues of implementing these, where the budget is, what the costs are, and kind of what your wish list is as far as moving forward with some of this.
That could take
Well, we might know, not everybody listening.
that could take the rest of the morning, most of the afternoon.
Quick. What are we doing?
But you know, and I'm going to be, you know, it may not be the kind of thing that, you know, people like to hear, but transportation and effective transportation systems across this country cost money. We as a transit system in Broward have historically been underfunded, significantly underfunded. When you compare our per capita contributions from Broward to the number of systems across the country, we're at the very bottom. Give you an example. People like to talk about Denver, and Denver, you know, I've visited Denver a number of times. Spectacular transit system. People talk about Portland. Again, another spectacular transit system. What they've done historically is, in the past, they did a much better job of planning public transportation. We're trying to overlay a transportation system in a community that's pretty much built out, and that should have been the other way around. But getting back to the funding issue, and don't just quote me on these numbers, but I can get the exact numbers for you. But the per capita contribution for a transit system like Portland, I understand, Tim, you might be able to help me with this.
About $250 per person.
$250 per person in the area. We're at about $45 or something in that neighborhood. So we are significantly underfunded the transit system. And you see the result. The result is we don't have enough service, quite frankly, anywhere in the county. And again, it's really just a matter of how transit is funded in this county. More and more transit systems are no longer owned and operated by municipalities and governments, but they're typically the independent authority with some sort of taxing ability. I'm very hopeful that at some point this year you will be hearing much more about the potential opportunity to fund public transit here in Broward. The county and many organizations around the county are in discussions about how do we best put together a system, a transportation system that best meets the needs of our community. And quite frankly, it's going to take money to do it. So discussions are ongoing, and I'm hopeful that at some point in the relatively near future, we'll see something on our ballot that will allow us to properly fund Broward County. Just as an example, when you compare us to our peers in the industry, with the number of passengers that we move on an annual basis, it's about 40 million, and the number of miles that we serve, and the number of hours of operation, we probably have about 50 to 60% of the available fleet that these other communities that are our peers have. So what that does, it does a couple of things. When you look at our metrics nationally, quite frankly, they look good. A lot of systems would like to have the efficiency that we have. The fact of the matter is that we, in our system, we transport 38.8 passengers per revenue hour. That means for every hour of every revenue service, every bus, throughout our entire span of service, we're transporting almost 39 passengers. The national average is 34. So what that means is, yes, our transit system is much more efficient, we get more return on our fare box than they do, but it also means that our buses are overcrowded. So those of you who live in the county for the last 5-7 years have noticed that because our revenues to fund the transit system have not grown with the population, what we've gone to is buying larger buses so that we can accommodate more people. We can do that for only so long, but the reality is we need a system that's much more robust. We need a system that's more comprehensive, that speaks to multi-modes of transportation, We are developing and planning right now for a light rail system downtown Fort Lauderdale. There is discussion for expansion of that system to the Port Airport, also to Western Broward. But these things are going to take money. And if our community doesn't take action now, because quite frankly, we're already way behind the eight ball. But the time is now for us to start serious discussions about funding public transit in Broward.
Thank you. And that's a perfect introduction because I did ask, I have Richard Blatton here, the chair of the MPO, and our MPO members to continue the discussion in regards to the possibilities of future funding sources. So,
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm James Cromar, the Director of Planning for the Broward MPO. And as Mayor Cooper said, we do have Chair Blattner, who's the chair of the MPO, but also Paul Calabrese, who's a regional transportation planner. He's going to explain a little bit more about some potential funding options. Let me give some background also on the Broward MPO itself. The Metropolitan Planning Organization is an agency of the federal government, and the purpose of it is to give local control for the expenditure of federal and state transportation funds. We have a board of elected officials that represent all 31 cities in Broward County, and the county commission, the school board, Tri-Rail has the voting membership, and FDOT is also represented. But they make the decisions about the federal and state funding that comes from transportation to this region. One of the key tools that we use is the long-range transportation plan. We call it the LRTP. We look out at a 20 to 25-year window to figure out what the transportation needs are for the region. What kind of roadway needs do we have? Bridges, port and airport needs. What kind of transit needs do we have? So we determine the needs, figure out the funding that's available, and develop a financially constrained plan. We just recently completed the 2040 long-range transportation plan, looking 25 years out to the future. With that plan, we identified that we have $8 billion, $8 billion with a B, $1 billion of funding that will come in the next 25 years. Of that funding, about 3/4 of it goes to maintain the existing system that we have. That leaves about $2 billion over the next 25 years for the board to direct funding for specific projects. We have looked at the needs that we have for the region, identified about $800 million worth of projects for transit and $700 million for roadways, a smaller pot, about $500 million for local projects. But that still leaves a gap of over $1 billion of projects we identified and we don't have funding for. That's our needs, our unfunded needs list. That alone was Broward MPO's findings. As Mayor Cooper mentioned, the city has over $200 million in potential needs that the funding needs to be identified. City of Fort Lauderdale did some planning of over $1 billion. Hollywood has about $80 million, $270 million of unfunded needs. So throughout the region, people are looking at the gaps that exist for the funding system. I appreciate Mr. Walton's comments also. We have money that can go toward transit projects, toward the capital, which is the construction, but then there's the ongoing operations and maintenance needs that is almost equal to the amount that we could spend in capital. Without any money to run the transit system, it doesn't make sense to fund the capital improvements. So we need to try to figure out a balance of those two needs. Mayor Cooper mentioned some projects in Hallandale Beach that they were looking at funding. And we've identified some as part of our long-range transportation plan. Some of those are in the plan, in the $8 billion that we have in our financially constrained plan, but the funding's not available for about 15 years. And I'm not sure if the city wants to wait that long to get some of these improvements done. So with that, we at the Broward MPO have a role to not only make decisions, but also educate the public. We have a program called Speak Up Broward, and it's been going for the last 2 or 3 years. The point was to go out to talk to the public and have a greater understanding of the role of the MPO, but also the role of funding and transportation. I think all of us in the last few years have probably heard about the federal level lack of funding for transportation, the gas tax, trust is getting depleted. How are we going to fund projects for the future? And so we've been having that conversation with the public and having an understanding of what do these transportation funding issues mean to you and each of you as you get up in the morning, go out to work, to school, whatever it is that you do to get around and live your life each day. We have done a series of surveys and have identified from the public that they are very supportive of looking at some additional funding options. that there would be a tremendous willingness to pay a potential penny sales tax that could go toward improving the traffic signals, adding community shuttles, microbus services we talked about, increasing rail options, different transportation options for the community. We've done statistically valid surveys and also just polls on the internet, and all of those have continued to show tremendous support for these improvements, these funding supports. A bit of background before I hand it over to Paul Calvarisi then to talk about this potential option. As part of Speak Up Broward, we did do research on various funding options to find the resources for transportation. We looked at maybe an increased driver's license tax or a license tag fee or bed tax for hotels. There's a new idea that's emerging about vehicle miles traveled, where you would have to pay a tax based on how much you drive each day on the roadways. As we looked at these, the best option that emerged for a predictable way of getting funding and also that would generate the most revenue is a surtax, a penny sales tax. This is a system that is already in place. The state could collect it and then bring the revenue down to Broward County and the communities here. So with that, let me hand it over to Paul Calvarisi to talk a little bit about what we've looked at in terms of surtax options, and then maybe Chair Blatter might want to speak a little bit after that.
Thank you, James. Paul Calvarisi, Broward MPO. So before I get into, I believe everybody has a sheet passed out. So before I get into the middle of the meeting, let's look at the front page. The reason it's called a compromise is there have been many discussions about which type of surtax to use. If you look at the third paragraph on the front page, you'll see there are two options: the transportation surtax and the infrastructure surtax. Each one of them statutorily allow you to spend the money in different ways. There's a fair amount of overlap. The major difference is that the transportation surtax allows you to fund the operations and maintenance of transit, as opposed to the infrastructure one, which does not. So you could have funding for mass transit, but funding for the vehicles, but you wouldn't be able to pay anybody to drive it, maintain it, and keep it running. Now, as we're going through this, you'll see the two boxes of the Mustangs. That was between the MPO board and Broward County as to, if we were to put something on the ballot, what does the language, what do we have to accomplish essentially? So if we go to the middle page, this one goes page 2. Anyone? Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. So now you'll see the compromise option. This is for the transportation surtax. And you'll see that 50% of the money would go to Broward County. That pays for the capital of the fleet, pays to running. You could also look at funding for traffic synchronization. And if you look all the way at the bottom, you'll see it does hit all of Broward County's Mustangs. Now on the right side in green, 50% of that goes to the municipalities. The bottom part, the local infrastructure bank, that would be distributed to the municipalities just based on population, just straight math. And that's for all the municipal local projects. For instance, all the good work that Hallandale Beach has done with their local plans, that could help advance the funding. This money is also completely bondable, so they could advance things even sooner. The top one, this regional transportation bank, that's intended for regional projects. So when you look at the municipalities, yes, they have projects that is solely within their borders, but then people travel through multiple cities. I don't know anybody who just lives and dies in one city in Broward County. At some point you have to leave. What we can do, what happens there is there would be a governance board that will look at demonstrated need, and that allows for the money to be used more efficiently. We have a running joke about bike lanes to nowhere, because you'll have one municipality who's very interested in bike lanes and their neighbor isn't. Or the projects are going on at two different times. So if you're a cyclist, it'd be horrible to be riding through Hollywood's complete streets. You get to a border, and then all of a sudden your bike facilities disappear. This top 25% is meant to look at regional projects, and then there's also an economy of scale. So we can combine them. Now the major thing you'll see here is this governance board. This is modeled after Sandag out in San Diego. They've had a half-cent sales tax. The reason their half-cent still generates more than we would here. But they've been doing this for about 25 years. And they have a board of professionals. Accounting, finance, and that's land use, legal aspects, construction management. And that's really the filter through which these major projects pass through. And this is that check and balance. This governance board would have auditing authority, so they publish regular audits, and it keeps everyone honest to make sure that they're spending the money the way the voters and the law intends it to be spent. And that would fall under all jurisdictions. The county, municipalities, all governments who use the money would fall under this governance board. And with it, I'd like to pass it on to Commissioner Blattner, if he has any of the comments to add.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank you, Mayor, for having this discussion. Unfortunately, my back is to the crowd. We need to flip this.
We could turn around.
No, that's okay. It's hard to do that. But I want to also compliment James and Paul. We have a fantastic staff at the MPO. I had a flashback when you were showing the pictures of this system of the future, where there were these little personal vehicles, and I thought about Barney Rubble and riding on a log to get someplace. It reminded me. Guess I'm showing my age there. We have tremendous needs in Broward County today because population growth has not stopped, but it's not going to stop either. And this is what others, I wish that Chris, you alluded to it, we really can't keep up with this. We can't stop people from moving here, and we can't stop people from having children. So our population is going to grow, and that just creates tremendous density problems. And it's reflected nowhere better than on city streets. People need to get to where they need to go, and the future is much more robust and effective and efficient public transportation. Chris, you articulated that very well. So, from a municipal standpoint, Mayor Cooper and myself and my commissioners, we are constrained. Our general fund revenues have some limits. We can't raise taxes to do all the things that city managers and elected officials recognize they need to do. If you have a 5-year capital improvement plan in your city, you're already constrained because you know you can't fund it. You could raise taxes, you could bond the money, but the public ultimately has to approve those things, and they're not going to approve it because it's onerous. And so the best way to accomplish the objective of financing the transportation and traffic solutions to all this, and the fairest way seems to be a surtax, which would be 1 cent sales tax on everything that is currently taxed today. It is not on anything that is not taxed. And it has a limitation also of applying only to the first $5,000 of any capital investment that you make. So if I were going to go out tomorrow and buy a $100,000 car because I want to have an environmentally sensitive car, and I want to show that I'm an environmentalist, it's only that 1 cent on the first $5,000 of the tax. So if you wanted to buy a home, and we know what housing prices are, it's only 1 cent on the first $5,000. So folks who legitimately are concerned with taxation being not fair to working families and poor, this is about as fair as you could get and still have a tax. If I may, you couldn't really see it up there, but although you all have this number behind you, for Hallandale Beach to be able to say that over the next 25 years, we can anticipate receiving over $62 million of funding. And I recognize that's probably a conservative number. because it only anticipates a growth of 3% each year, which would be maybe CPI, but it doesn't reflect changes in economic development, which will happen in all of our cities. So that $62 million figure, elected officials and staff in Hallandale Beach would say, boy, what we could do with that. And the mayor, you showed the gap. But here's the thing. If I were a resident of Hallandale, or I could transition myself into Hollywood, I would say, well, but what are we going to do with that money? This is really the challenge that we all have now. If this surtax passes, it gets on the ballot, cities have a responsibility and an obligation to go to the community and say, look, we're going to get this money first year, 10th year, 15th year, 20th year. What do you want to do with it? The only way this will pass is if everybody can see that they get something for it. And we learned that when the school board passed an $800 million bond issue that maybe 6 months prior, no one in the world would have guessed that that would pass. And it passed with 73% approval because the school system went to every school and said, this is exactly what you're going to get. We're not here today to discuss how well that's been implemented, but it did work. And it's worked in Dade County where they passed $1 billion school tax. So the opportunity that cities have is to now say, look, this is the amount of money that we're going to have. Here are our needs. How can we best use that money? In addition to the fact that the money, you can bond it, you can also use it for grant matches. And most cities, I'll use mine as an example. I've said it public, so if you're from Hollywood staff, you've heard this before. Grant applications are where city managers, let me just put it another way. Grant applications frequently don't come to us as elected officials because the city manager and his staff say, well, we don't have the money to make the match. And so they're in our budget this year. And so a project that would cost, that would give us $5 million on the grant, and all we had to do is come up with $1 million, we would say, we don't have that in the budget. And yet, as policymakers, we're supposed to be the ones that say, find the money, let's figure out how to do this, or we can't do it. But we don't get that chance. So here's a chance when you know you have this money coming in to say, if a grant opportunity comes along that's related to traffic and transportation and infrastructure, we can use some of this money to make that grant happen, the grant match happen. So what encourages me greatly is that the MPO and the county have worked more closely together on this project than probably anything in the last 5 or 10 years that will bring the cities and the county in alignment. And I think that this plan, which is going to need a little more tweaking, really does make sense. On February 16th, the board of the MPO and the Board of County Commissioners is going to meet and hopefully have a kumbaya moment where we'll say this is exactly what we've been looking for, and we have each other's mutual support. We have each other's back in this, and we'll pass this. Again, Mayor, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, thank you. I know from chairing meetings in the past, I do have a couple of questions from the audience, and then I'll take some roundtable questions. First, one was to revisit the southbound left-hand turn, and these are relative to, I'll have one that will be relative to regional transportation plan. Remove the left-hand lane at Hallandale Beach Boulevard in Dixon. Ironically, this is a ongoing issue of eastbound traffic that's actually was implemented by FDOT to help speed traffic through the Dixie Highway corridor. It's created a lot of angst in our community. The alternative was removing all the lefts on Dixie Highway and First. We actually have an agenda item. I sent a letter actually, who's the letter? I forget now. We sent a letter to the county and FDOT in regards to doing a trial of the right. So hopefully after we discuss it, I don't know if it's on this agenda or bringing it back on the 17th, to actually remove that, what people call a bottleneck, and go to a trial on right. So that is to come. So, the other question is in regards to the rail traffic and the, I know we're doing quiet zones, and the question is, north-south rails next to Dixie Highway. During the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., how many trains will be added? Can you answer that one? Because I know.
Okay,
I don't,
if
go
you want to, you can go ahead.
Go.
So right now we have about 8 to 10 freight trains per day running on the Florida East Coast Railway. That's the one parallel to Dixie. When All Aboard Florida begins operations, they'll be adding another 32 passenger trains per day. The major difference between the freight and the passenger is their length and speed. The freight trains can be up to 10,000 feet, so it's approximately 2 miles, and will go about 40 miles per hour. So that's a lot of train to move. The All Aboard Florida trains are about 8 to 9 cars. They'll be traveling much faster. I think in this area they'll be about 79 miles per hour. So All Aboard Florida has quoted that from the time the arms go down to when they go up, it should take about 60 seconds for the train to pass through the intersection.
Thank you. And then the other question is in regards to, and I believe you touched on this a little bit, and I covered it. What are we doing about the traffic on Hallandale Beach Boulevard? I think we've, revisited that a couple different times, and certainly we share that concern, and I personally share that concern, and I'm sure my colleague at the table will agree here too. So we're looking at creative and alternative ways to address the volume of traffic on Hallandale Beach Boulevard, partnering with the MPO and VCT to see how we can continue to work. And I had a question actually myself, but I'll take it after everybody else has it laid out on the table in regards to adaptive signalization. A conversation, and it could be a robust conversation, but I'm going to talk, there's a lot of angst with development throughout our city and many other cities, because I know Dane is redeveloping, Fort Lauderdale's redeveloping, and it's quite unique. A lot of people will just say, well, just stop development. In reality, when you start discussing just stop development, it is not realistic. We have, and it could be a whole other conversation for a whole other workshop, which I'd love to have and host. But in regards to redevelopment in cities, what it comes down to is owners of properties have property rights. Just as we own a house, we expect it to be a single-family house. If somebody has commercial property or they want to look at redevelopment, they have a right to, and by law, looking at the highest and best use of their properties. So with that said, in redevelopment, we have to look at the balance of redevelopment and what those impacts are, in addition to addressing affordable housing, population growth. So the whole issue with redevelopment and traffic is much more complex than just saying stop development, not put cars on the road. So we're very sensitive to that, and I don't want to shout out your name, but I'd love to have another conversation in regards to those issues with you. The other question we've looked at in our city is traffic flying down streets and through the neighborhoods. We are very sensitive to this. That was one of the issues why we also did not want to eliminate the left, the right, make it a right, and remove the lefts is what it does do to the neighboring community, what it does to the single-family home communities. So it is an issue, and we actually can look at calming devices. I know that's another question with Broward County Transit, and some of the rules and regulations with stop signs and the control of those rules and regulations. So we look at traffic calming, also signage, 3rd Avenue, and I'd like to even suggest that many of the traffic going through these neighborhoods are our neighbors, which is really sad, because we have it even in our neighborhood, which is one way in and one way out. So it's enforcement, it's developing and understanding that we're all neighbors, and we should drive slower, and just take our time and plan our time accordingly rather than rushing. And that was it so far from the audience. I'm going to take some questions if we want to go around. I know, Kevin, while we had people here, professionals in the audience, I think you had a shout out you wanted to do about a position.
Yes, the city of Hallandale Beach is currently advertising for a transportation planner position. so we can get moving on.
No pressure.
Anybody's interested or know somebody's interested, please have them check our human resources
Can
website.
I piggyback on that?
Sure.
Did a conversation a number of months ago with someone that I really respect a great deal from Fort Lauderdale. I think cities all think they need to have a transportation planner or a parking person or whatever, but I think we need to look at things much differently now. We need to look at things holistically. It's not transportation. It's not parking. It's parking, transportation, traffic, economic development. It's all these things together that have to work together. The parts have to fit together. They can't be silos and pillars. I mean, a parking person is a very mechanical thing. We're counting meters, we're counting how much money we collect, we count how many traffic tickets are issued and so forth. That's a mechanical function that doesn't require a college degree in economics, or planning, or engineering. And yet, you can't isolate any one of these functions and say, if I fix it here, it fixes it there, because it doesn't. And so I would challenge you, as I would challenge my own city, I've said the same thing to them, to look at a more holistic approach to some of these functions. And it may mean that you have a department instead of 1 or 2 people or 3 or 4 people separated in different cubicles and in different parts of the building instead of working together as a group.
Just increase the budget for the position, I think.
Not my city.
And I think that was part of the goal, because we saw in our development services, they're all interconnected, and we understand that as a community and want to make sure that it's integrated across the boards, no matter what. Dan, any comments?
Well, just on that point, Commissioner, and I thoroughly understand it. I think, an analogy I used to use many years ago is that people don't leave their house, they don't get in their car and leave their house to go and park somewhere. They go with an intended purpose. So parking and transportation are really means to an end. If they're going to a destination, whether it be for dinner or whether it be for work, it's really a matter of how do you facilitate that. I think that, my takeaway in all of this discussion, and I'm sure that the audience here is probably thinking it's pretty dismal. It's going to cost a lot of money, and there isn't a quick solution, and there really isn't. But the reality is that this is a different kind of thing, and I was just thinking about how much our society has changed with respect to communication, as an example. Just by show of hands, how many folks in the audience still have a landline in their homes? Just a couple of them. If I had asked the same question 5 years ago, probably all of us would have raised our hands. And so it's really an example of how and what may seem to be very foreign or very, very futuristic, in just a very short period of time, things will transition. And I think that the issue of transportation has to transition likewise. It has to be something that we look at very differently going forward, because as Paul mentioned, we can't build additional roads. We have a limited, I think it was Paul, limited amount of right-of-way. So the idea of how we move from one location to the other has to be different. So that's just my comment.
Mayor, can I jump in real quick? Appreciate combining both comments from the city of Hallandale Beach. When you mentioned that some of these improvements are going to cost a lot of money, Mayor Cooper has mentioned a lot of what's gone on in Denver, and Chris alluded to that with that investment that's gone on over time. On a personal note, about 25 years ago, I started working as a planner. Some of the first projects I worked on were projects that the community, the city and county of Denver, the voters had voted to approve funding for investments within the community. They had some economic downturns in the late 80s and recognized that if they were going to succeed in the future, they needed to invest in themselves and improving the community. So some of the first projects I worked on were projects to improve the flow of traffic, of alleviating congestion at certain intersections, about investments in streetscape to make the place where people live and work more inviting, parks to increase the value of the community. So those particular funding options improved the scale of the city. There was the airport and convention center, all those other things too, and the transit tax. But each of those improved the city, but also made it possible for somebody, a young person like me, to make a living and then to contribute to the community. So it's kind of funny, 25 years later, we're looking at, there's an opportunity to do something similar for the people of Broward. It's an investment in our future. Our demographics show that we'll have a tremendous increase in the number of people over age 65. What can we do to encourage the young people who grow up here and go to school? What can we do to encourage them to continue to live here and raise their families? I know a lot of people that go to college and then go elsewhere because that's where the opportunities are. So for those who like to see the future of Broward with the families and different age levels of communities being here, this is one way that we can invest in our future.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Keith Longman. I'm one of the city commissioners here. And it's actually a pleasure to see 30 or 40 people here, to see some stakeholders, to see some other elected officials from around the county, obviously the high-level people that are here from the other agencies, which to me is probably the most important thing, because if you look at where Hallandale is a location in Broward County, we're literally the southeast tip of the whole county. So if we were to do this by ourselves, really what we probably accomplish here. So the partners, I think having the NPO, and I don't see FDOT should be an important part of the discussion, but if we try to do this by ourselves, like the other 31 cities in Broward County, what will we have other than chaos? So I'm encouraged when we see other partners that are in the room that are trying to move it holistically across the board. And I also think that we have our needs that need to be met, but also we need to do it in conjunction with everybody else, because again, the city manager said, this is a mobility issue across the region realistically. So we have the transportation with the train and roadways, I-95, the last mile, as we've heard, and all the buzzwords that we've all heard before. Now what I'd really like to see is a little bit more of the solutions and obviously the funding, but that to me is the important thing, is that we're all sitting at this table and we're trying to work together collaboratively, because ultimately that's what's going to happen here. Incremental is what it's at, slow but sure, keep to the path, set goals either 5, 7, 10 years, and then fund those goals to make sure we're actually getting done what we're promising to the residents. Because that's what people want to see, is actual improvement. Even if it's incremental, people want to see improvements. Thank you.
Hi, Jerry Grazios, City of North Lauderdale. The big issue in the north end of the county has been the missing link between I-95 and the Sawgrass Expressway, southwest 10th Street. I know the NPO is working on it, but when you look at you travel around the country, Broward is one of the biggest metropolitan areas that does not have a loop where you could bypass. If you're coming in, instead of adding to the congestion on I-95, having an alternative where you could loop around the county. And I know that's because we have the missing link. And that's a major issue in the north end, is we really in Broward up in the north have no east-west way of moving traffic. So when that gets done, or when that gets resolved, then you can take a lot of traffic that wants not to go around Broward. Who wants to go right through the middle of a major area, a major metropolitan area? So we really need to address how we can get traffic around that doesn't have to drive through. And with that said, our Northwest Council is meeting in about another hour or so in Parkland. So I leave here and use our rapid roads to get from here to Parkland. But I want to thank you for doing this. I want to thank everybody for coming out, and we need to do more of this around now. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, well, hopefully this is a catalyst to make sure every community, as a blueprint over the next couple of weeks to really post something like this in their communities and start this collaboration.
Two last comments. First of all, I think that the fact that you already have ideas and some good ideas here of what Hallandale can do to alleviate traffic shows some connectivity. That is absolutely, when I see, the split, and I see the county trying to do the O&M and trying to do the mass transit, my hope is that every city can do like what Hallandale does and have those other ideas with the connectivity, because it makes sense. The other part is, I think for the coastal communities, and I'm not sure if this is allowed, but I think it is part of it, with regard to sea level rise. I think for Hallandale, for Hollywood, Dania, for Hallandale, some of the infrastructure stuff that's going to be needed in terms of maybe even raising roads or things like that, this could be one of those places where we look to. I think you want to mainly use your individual money for doing your plan. But I think we're going to also have to be thinking in terms of where the most vulnerable spots are, and because there's no money for that other one. I mean, we're all looking for money, but this might be one of those places where we can say, this might be a possibility. But thank you again for helping.
Yeah, thanks. And it touches on a little bit of the adaptability, the sustainability. Our basis of design report addresses underground construction. So I'm sorry I didn't make that clear. It actually discusses water, potable water, storm water, flooding, and of course we've been addressed with flooding for a while and moving forward with those initiatives. But we can't do it alone. That was the point of today too, that we need to come together and collaborate, because if we do have money that we can leverage as a local share to get projects done, our one project alone on the Northeast, our local share was over $3 million.
Closer to 5 million.
5 million now, I know in the beginning, but we had over additional funding. So thank you for that. And I also forgot to say, because I did see, and excuse my back again, some of our business partners that are doing development. And we also, to answer one of the residents' questions, we partner with our developers to make investments with us in addressing transit and traffic and all the issues that go along. But that's just one part of a pie, a funding pie. And I didn't show that, I didn't want to get too much in front of the slides, but we leverage those partnerships so they can mitigate their traffic impacts. So we look at that, but they can't be the sole source of funding. So I know you had comments already.
Hi, good morning. I'm Beverly Williams, and I do apologize for being late. But the reason I had an 8 o'clock doctor's appointment in Pompano, so I had to make a decision to get here in Hallandale by 9 o'clock. So I had a very interesting conversation with myself all the way here. Am I going to make that light? I'm going to miss this light. I'm going to make that light. So I did do about 40% of light in getting here, but I did make it here safely. But I've been on the MPO board almost a year now, and it has been a very interesting group that I have become a part of. So some things that we need to do take place in my city that is going to take a lot of talking, but I'm here to do that. Thank you.
Okay, do I have...
Oh, and my city manager's here also. Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I failed to mention this earlier. Those of you at your seats, you have a little flyer here. It has a link to the Speak Up Broward page on the Broward MPO website. And this particular flyer that's up on the page on the screen, that is also a link on the Speak Up Broward page. So stay close to it because it's an evolving compromise. There's a meeting with County Commission. This may adjust a little bit, so that's the place to find the latest information.
If there's no more questions, comments?
Thank you very much.
I want to thank you. And oh, wait, I'm sorry, thanks.
Good morning, my name is Jim Bexton. I'm a resident here at Hallandale Beach at 473 Golden Isles Drive. And first I'd like to thank the mayor and commissioners for putting this event together. It's really a super way moving forward. I just have a question about the sales tax, and of course I'm for it, but I'm just concerned about what has happened in the past when we passed the lottery, when we passed gambling, and it was like vote for number 2, vote yes for schools. But then what happened was, and correct me if I'm wrong, those monies that were already in the budget from the state, well, now that we're getting this money, we're not going to use it, so you're pretty much going back to square one. So my question is, and I'm not sure if anyone can answer here today, is if we have this 1% sales tax, will the same thing happen with our budget for transportation in the future? So, that's my question.
I could try and answer that. One of the things that we have to admit is, with the exception of the Hallandale Beach population, no one trusts government to do much of anything right. So we were conscious right from the start that the governance of this program had to be removed from government. We did not want the county to do this. We did not want the MPO to do this. We wanted to create a separate organization, a governance structure, which is displayed in that blue band across the back there. And the way this would work is that the tax would be collected, The money would go to the state. The state at the end of the year would send a check to this governance board to go into an escrow account. The escrow account would be managed by this board. And they would, for example, say, well, Hallandale Beach, you said that in the first 5 years of this plan, you wanted to spend, and I'm making numbers up, $20 million. And your plan for doing that, every one of the things that you want to do is an eligible activity. And we think the timeline is reasonable. So that first year, we're going to allocate $3.5 million to accomplish your first year plan. And at the end of the year, that board is going to have a public meeting of all the stakeholders. And the stakeholders are 31 cities in Broward County. And the governance board is going to say, we allocated X number of dollars for projects this year. Here's a list of those projects. Here's how much money was allocated by city. And here's the status of the projects that are being accomplished in those cities. So we think that's a rough way of describing the structure so that it's controlled by independent people. And by the way, they would be paid for their work. If we took 1/20th of 1% of the $300 million that first year tax would generate, it's $150,000. We won't probably spend that much, but we will pay those members that are identified in the blue band, plus some sort of an administrative assistant to coordinate things so that there's independence. And by the way, those that are chosen to be on that board can't be doing business with the county, can't be doing business with the city, but that's really hard. So we have to craft out of that. This is part of our discussions moving forward. There has to be a carve-out where someone can say, I have to recuse myself because I have an interest in this. But the goal is as much transparency and independence as could possibly put it in the plan. Good question, thank you.
It's just a follow-up too. I actually posed the same question in regards to our partnership with existing partnership with Broward County, because I raised it earlier, and I know Chris is here. We have a partnership with our minibus, and certainly if we're leveraging that dollars, I want that to be a clawback. So there has to be a look at, this is the current level we're funding, and not have the same thing happen with the lottery. So I think that was kind of what your question was.
Yes.
You're spending all this money already on transit. You're not going to supplement, and I don't know if you want to tackle it at all, but I think that was the same question was asked.
Well, no, if my city was, and I'm obviously making this up, if my city was spending $5 million a year on projects that are eligible for the surtax, and they want to use that money for the surtax and take that $5 million that was in the general fund for transportation and use it for something else, they can do that. They can do that. Why not? Because that's a benefit to the taxpayer. Because that way, other projects in the capital improvement plan that might not be eligible for the surtax could be accomplished.
Anybody else? Well, I want to thank you all for taking time out of your schedule. And again, to the other electeds, if you want to, I hope you set a template forward to give you some ideas to what to do in your community with the forum. But thank you, and